So, welcome in everyone. I am Esdenet Adeswe. I'm the co-founder of ProductMind. It's a consultancy and advisory firm. My partners, Audrey and I, run it, and we help high growth companies build better products and stronger product teams. We work with product and tech leaders to review their strategy, work with them to understand AI and its place within their organization, and as well as transform their teams and their organization towards success in this day and age. My partner, Audrey, is here. Audrey, do you want to say anything before I keep going?
Uh, Not much. It's just, this is community space. So just a lot of love. And I have to say, I'm super excited to have Leslie here. We don't talk enough about creativity in the process. And so I'm waiting with bated breath. I just want to hear what she has to say and ask some cool questions.
Okay, so before I go there
Little love
yet,
at you too. Little love back at you.
ProductMind is also a community. It is a Slack group. If you're not part of that, please join. We have the link. We're going to be dropping that in the link. We also have a podcast. It's really for us this idea of a place where product leaders can learn together. Sometimes it gets really quiet, but there are a few of you who are not shy and have been really open and honest about all the things you're struggling with and shared it there. And we've been able to lean in and help you. So it's free, it's active, and it's where today's conversation will continue. I know our community has people across the world, so thank you for putting down where you're calling from or you're dialing in from. So really good. And then I do have two quick book plugs before I introduce Leslie fully. First, Ajay and I wrote Building Rocket Ships, Product Mind for High Growth Companies. If today is interesting to you, you want to learn more about product building, it's a deep read, so the link is in the chat. And then Leslie, our guest, she also wrote Creative Velocity, Propelling Breakthrough Ideas in the Age of Generative AI. Please grab a copy. It is filled with interesting stories and interviews and really good and applicable techniques. I am personally a lover of puzzles, so she won me by ending each chapter with a puzzle. And so we also have that link in the chat. So without further ado, let me tell you about Leslie. Leslie is a global product executive. She's IDEO trained, design thinking leader, and she wrote that amazing book I mentioned. She has launched some of the most consequential products of our era. Truth is, the first online streaming service, Real Networks. She also launched the first commercial Android phone at T-Mobile. I was there, I witnessed it. She also built an omni-channel experience at Best Buy. So at T-Mobile, we had this idea of a store within a store, and she took some of that and took it into Best Buy. And she was actually personally hired by Steve Jobs at Apple. Not many people can say that. She runs Product Guild. She co-created the Product Management Leadership Accelerator. She teaches a Maven course. She is just fantastic. So with that, Leslie, welcome. It is so good to have you with us.
I'm delighted to be a part of this community. Thanks for inviting me.
Welcome, welcome, welcome. So just as a matter of process, if you have a question, please raise your hand and then we'll pull from that. But while y'all are getting warmed up, I do have a couple of questions that I already prepped with Leslie, and I would like to get into that. So we can keep it real quick, right? I want to start by naming a tension that I think everybody in this room may be feeling in some way, particularly when you put design thinking and AI at the same time. So design thinking was built for humans, designing for humans. I think that was the part of what was at the core. But now we're using AI to help us design. And we're also designing products that have AI inside them. Is there anything that breaks about classic design thinking when both of those things are true at once? Building with AI and using AI when design thinking was originally for humans, designing for humans?
There's such a rich question on a couple of dimensions, so I'm going to peel it apart on two very big ones. The first one is human-centered design requires interaction with humans. It requires ethnography, it requires understanding the human condition, the human experience, and actually seeing humans in action, because what they do versus what they say is different. And so when we take out that piece of insight, right? That actual human behavior, the irrationality of human behavior, the emotion of human behavior. And we look at just the data that comes from customer research. And we just put that data inside AI and ask for a synthesis from AI on what we've seen there. And we trend it and pattern recognition and all of that, which is goodness. We are at risk of losing the part that is humanity. The things that people said they'd never do that they now do. And I'll give you a great example. I never thought I would get in the car with a stranger and pay them to take me in their car somewhere. In the days that Uber came out, all I could think about was my parents telling me, don't get in a car with a stranger. And then I realized every time I got in a taxi cab, I was getting in the car with a stranger. But my mindset, right, at the time that Uber came out was that was a company's car, not an employee that I was worried about. Whereas in the case of an employee and a human and their car, how much could I trust Uber? What was Uber's role in that equation, right? And so right now, I don't think twice about getting into some stranger's car, but my behavior has changed. My emotion around that experience has changed. And so humans, they adapt, but sometimes they don't. Sometimes you're asking them to try a new behavior that just doesn't sit well with them, either because of a trust issue. They don't trust the behavior you're asking them to do should be done with you, or because they see the experience in a vacuum. They don't see it in a larger context, right? And in that moment where you present the experience, it's a meh. Well, maybe, right? It doesn't compel them. And so I think the first part of what you asked is really about the risk of losing that human centeredness and that behavioral, emotional, and cultural context that sometimes AI won't see and has so much psychological distance from, it may get it wrong, right? So that's one part of it. The other part of it too is how humans interact with AI can be different on any given day. I can ask the same question today and then a week later ask that same question and get a slightly different answer. And so with human-centered design and design thinking, we assume consistency in that behavior. We assume that that predictability comes from that research that we've done and that will happen each time the customer, the user encounters our product. But with AI, you can't count on that. It isn't linear in that way. It isn't predictable in that way. And so when you see how people behave in the context of an AI-driven product or an AI interaction, it isn't always the same day to day. And those models get updated, the way they ask questions change. And so how you can predict how they will behave is also now different, right? So those two things really stand out for me when you transfer what's great about human-centered design and design thinking into an AI-driven product or an AI-driven ideation session, because now you're really having to figure out where to insert judgment and discernment back into the process to make sure of relevancy and meaning and purpose.
Okay, that's really good. We're going to go really deep into the AI process, et cetera. But before we do that, I actually know that there are probably people here who come from the days we came from where, creativity and design thinking was thought of as this thing you did in a room. So I want to pull on this thread that I don't think we talk about honestly enough, which is like IDEO, design thinking as at least as IDEO codified it. While it was about human-centered design, it was also associated with some a very specific picture, which is humans standing at a wall together, sticky notes, facilitation, etc. And that methodology kind of encoded this idea of co-location, where the energy of each other, riffing, half-formed ideas being completed by others, right? Then obviously 2020 happened. And then we moved to Miro to try and do this. We're all working remote, right? The async culture took hold. And we were still trying to bring humanness to that collaboration. Now, fast forward, we now are not just adding, we no longer have that co-location advantage. We now have this idea of AI. So we've taken a methodology that was really codified and built around bodies in a room, and we've run it through several filters: remote, async, AI. Have we been honest about how we keep human centeredness in this methodology and how we retain that, and are we thinking deeply about bringing all the benefit that Apple IDEO had in this context? Like, so I guess the question is, what did we lose when design thinking left the co-location space? And I'm not talking about the romantic version of, oh, let's go back into the office. Talk to me about how you think about the fundamentals of drawing from that body in the room energy that we had at the genesis of design thinking.
Yeah. So what was great about that, and having been a part of it multiple times, what I always appreciated about that, not only was the energy, but the disparate perspectives that what people would bring into a conversation in that moment, whether it was from their own life experience or from the things that they were passionate about. And so you were inviting people to have a platform to share that into the idea, right? And in that way, it
Mm-hmm.
was a level playing field, right? Everyone's idea
Mm-hmm.
was welcome, and the energy and educational value of everyone's idea was considered necessary, right? You wanted
Mm-hmm.
that level of participation. And so I do worry a little bit that the perspectives that would sit in those rooms, right, that would challenge an idea or would enhance an idea, uh, tend to go all now to AI. And we look at AI as
Mm-hmm.
being the one that challenges our ideas or brings more new ideas into the picture. And so we lose a little bit of that firsthand experience with why this would or wouldn't work for me if I saw that solution. And so
Mm-hmm.
I always used to appreciate being reminded in those sessions that people didn't live my life, that what I thought
Mm-hmm.
was how people did things or what mattered to people was the same as everybody in the room. And so when
Mm-hmm.
you're in the room, you get that benefit of diverse thinking and divergent thinking, right? Because of
Mm-hmm.
that differential. I think with AI, the biggest thing we lose is speed creates convergence too quickly. And the speed to come
Mm-hmm.
up with ideas and to push forward ideas with AI uh, reduces that time and obscures that judgment and forces you to ask the question, is there another point of view? But when I had 10 people in
Mm-hmm.
a room who all weren't raised like I was raised and didn't go to school where I went to school and didn't have the job experiences that I had up until that point, um, I was forced to be exposed, right, to other
Mm-hmm.
perspectives of it. And I think that
Mm-hmm.
part of being in the room was really super valuable. I don't feel that when I ideate with AI in the same way. I feel like it's on me
Mm-hmm.
to actually solicit those other perspectives. What if
Yes.
I was a this person, or what if I had this background? Would the answer still hold? So I have to take a
Yeah.
lot more responsibility to pull out those voices when I'm collaborating with AI.
You've touched on the next question that I had, but before I go to that question, I really want to encourage the room. Like, if there are questions that are just you're not sure how to ask them, put it in the chat. I will distill them, synthesize them. My team will look at it and bring it forward. So please, 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 just we want to hear. I don't want to be the only one asking questions. It's an AMA, not an interview with Leslie, and everything is welcome. This is really a safe space. Leslie, you were talking about having to wear that personality and be the person challenging AI. And I think this ties to a thing you mentioned in your book, which is really around, which I think is probably the most contrarian thing, which is the prompt engineering piece, right? And how, I mean, I want you to explain it, because even Audrey and I were going, is that really what she meant? Or did she mean that? But it's this idea that you said that that the most transformative thing leaders can do with AI is the exact opposite of prompt engineering. I think that's what you said.
Yeah.
I want to
And I
understand that
understand, but
better.
yeah, it was meant to be provocative, but I think the idea from my perspective is I've watched people learn how to engineer a prompt to get an answer, to find an answer. And it's very answer
Mm,
driven in my mind when I think about prompt engineering, right? It's making
mhm,
sure you've given the data that will get you a relevant answer back. And when I think
mhm,
about that, that is very much about convergent thinking, right? Going towards a space
mm,
quickly based on all the insights you could put into a well engineered prompt to get something to work with that is valuable enough for you to move forward, right? What I
mhm,
believe people are not taught to do with AI is to have that ideation conversation, to ask open-ended questions that don't generate a quick answer, that in fact produce multiple avenues to explore, right? And to use the time to bring more answers to the table, but not so much to get to an answer quickly. Right. And so where pattern recognition is going to happen a lot faster, with AI, there is speed benefit to it. But what I've really seen in all the classes I've taught and all the workshops I've run is that people have this hunger for an answer, and that the challenge is to be comfortable in the ambiguity for a while with an open-ended question that doesn't have a right answer, and that you are not looking for the right answer, but more fodder for your investigation, for your interrogation, for your discovery work. And because we as humans quickly narrow to what we know, prompt engineering tends to service that, right? It services that view that getting somewhere quickly and getting an answer quickly and being able to move forward from something concrete is valuable. So speed is something we valued since the inception of Agile, right? Like speed is our natural tendency, and prompt engineering is really a tool for speed in my mind. I want to spend time absorbing an area problem space. I want to ask questions that help me ask more questions, and that help me explore more options than I would have imagined that might seem ridiculous. But then I ask, well, why did you say that? Why did you come up with that? Where did that come from? Have you looked in other domains that might give me something to think about? Right. And so when I go through the process of ideating in a non-prompt engineering way, especially using these techniques in the book, my goal, right, is to dwell, not to speed. My goal is to sit in that ambiguity and enjoy it and embrace it in a way that helps me organize my thinking and not meander aimlessly. And so I think the way that when I say that, I'm more thinking about prompt engineering as a tendency to converge on an answer. And this other idea of using these creative thinking techniques is really to encourage us to diverge before we converge by actually asking open-ended questions and using the follow-up questions that AI provides every time I do it as to, no, not this, let's go down this path a little more. And to be okay in that ambiguity and navigating it.
That's actually really insightful. Really.
Wow.
And so I think you
Okay.
come across that clearly in the book, though. That's interesting. It's interesting that was a tripwire. So good to know.
No, but that was a good, clear, can I jump in? Is that okay?
Of course.
That was a good, clear thing. And Isn't brought that up and I was really intrigued by that, but your response was really clear. Something you said struck me. And as I read your book, I was like, we don't spend enough time talking about creativity. We don't spend enough time injecting creativity. I think it's B2B SaaS. All those boring websites with forms and clicky, clacky, whatever. When I was on Twitter, there was more creativity because I think when we're in the consumer space, taste matters so much. There's like 100 different ways you can deliver anything, and creativity matters. But in the SaaS world, I think it's more cookie cutter. So I feel like the creativity conversation has lost to the customer conversation. Like we now know as product people that, we got to do customer discovery. You got to look at the data, but we don't talk about ethnography as much as I did when I was at Microsoft. We talk about discovery, and those are different things, although maybe connected. So I guess my question is, how do you make the case for creativity within the creation of technology that is valuable? I'm staying away from human because you could have a value system that doesn't really care about humans, but we all care about profit. And maybe sometimes we care about good in the world. How do you make a case for creativity as a real center for building valuable technology companies today, especially with AI?
Yeah, that is such a great question on a couple of different dimensions. So I want to come back to the B2B one because I think that's a really good touchstone, but I feel that the broader question of how do you do that is that now AI is actually going to is forcing us not just to converge on ideas, but to homogenize how we approach things, right? Because it gives us a perspective, right, that is the best analysis of what's available, and that is what your competitors are also looking at, right? And so there's nothing proprietary about that discovery work when their competitors doing it in the same space, using LLMs to come up with patterns and ideas, right? So I think at the broad level, we lose creativity when we homogenize towards the AI-driven outcomes, right? Without a human intervening to ask the questions that make things not only novel and unique and imaginative, but meaningful, valuable, and purposeful. And those matter for brands. Okay, that's where you really, the answer may be the answer, but if 6 different brands give that same answer, they've now diminished what differentiates them as a brand, right? So that value, meaning, and purpose is really where creativity has to serve, right? The business person going in and looking for an outcome from AI, right? Because the outcome has to not be a linear answer to a question, but a way it sits in a context, in an environment, in a brand definition, right? In a customer mindset when they approach your business, right? So all of that has to help you pull from that normative answer to something that's special. That's I think the most important part is that asking for a way forward isn't necessarily going to differentiate you or your thinking, and therefore will by definition be less creative. But getting back sort of to that B2B question and that sense of where creativity lives and whether it lives in just consumer businesses like Twitter or whether it can live in B2B, I think the fundamental challenge in people's understanding of creativity is that it's only product driven. And when I think about this, I want to call back to that subscription business that we talked about in my intro, right? And that's because that only happened because there was a legal and a finance person who made subscription models for media types possible. The way the system worked existed. It was patented because it actually also included this methodology for assessing what rights people had to licensed media content. And all of that was legal and financial. And we typically, whether it's in design thinking workshops or whether it's in marketing, don't think of those as our most creative people. And yet those people are the ones who are disrupting business every day. And so I think this B2B SaaS limit is a mentality limit. And it's the same limit that people use when they apply it to people in operations jobs or legal or finance. And when I launched the book, I literally had 5 lawyers in the room at my book party because every one of them was my partner in some innovation that I couldn't have made possible without their creative thinking. And that, so I think when we think about losing creativity, part of it is we never really gave everyone their due as a creative contributor. And now that's even worse if we're going one-on-one with AI and we forget that those people might have a point of view about ethics, legal ramifications, or the cost of that product now that you're entering it with a different technology stack and what that could mean to the overall business economics, right? So those people are generally not in the room when you do design thinking workshops with Post-its and everything. And now what you have to do is make sure they are consequentially a part of your innovation planning and thinking. And that is where you're really, I think, inviting creative thinking into the mix, because in that scenario, you're inventing a new way of doing things. And kind of going back to your original question about what did we lose and why I kind of created this other framework around it, is I feel like we looked at possibilities with how might we in design thinking, but we didn't look at consequences. And we didn't look at systems always or context. And so what I think we have to do more, and where maybe that design thinking failed us, is putting all of the possibilities on the table and then looking at the consequences of them down the road. So what if we're successful in building this product? Then what did we create? Did we create more expenses? Did we create more challenges for consumers to do the things they used to do? What did we do as a consequence of this possible solution. And that also takes creativity, right? To prevent those sort of secondary consequences for our innovation or our novelty. I'm looking at your face to make sure I'm landing my message well. I feel like the wheels are turning.
I love how that's how my face looks all the time.
Resting.
No, not just that. Resting, pondering face. No, I love how you expanded definition of, even though I didn't ask for it, the definition of creativity you expanded in your response, which reminded me of all the time I've needed lawyers to be creative, exactly as you said, in order to deliver a solution. So in many ways, I think you said creativity never left, but I'm struck by how we don't have language for it and how it doesn't feel like we pull for it. Your book is the first book I've seen in a long time that really pulls for it. And I feel, I'm from an era where I understand the value of it. And I feel a little bereft that I haven't read your book or some version of your book in the last 10 years. So I'm very, very excited. I want to actually ask you another question, but I'm starting to think of all the different Claude and Codex skills I can build around creativity to counterweight the fact that you're talking to a model and it's telling you exactly what you want, which is not
what you want to hear. Exactly.
What you want to hear. So
it's great
anyway,
that you said that because I've already built 2 Claude skills for 2 of these techniques in the book. And because I felt like if the circumstances require me to do some creative thinking around them, I could drop a description of the problem, forget the prompt. I could just drop a description of the problem and then run the skill, and it would give me back ways to think about that problem without it actually giving me the answer. And
if you have an open source GitHub for it, or maybe you can share with this team because
I'll make sure you guys have it so you can share it with the community on Slack. I've got 2, one for the generic parts technique in the book and the other for the premeditations of evil technique, where you can determine how to make a more resilient plan by imagining failure. So
that's awesome.
Yeah, so these skills, exactly, you nailed it. That's what really is the difference between prompt engineering. I'm engineering a skill. It's a little bit like engineering a prompt, but I'm having a conversation about a problem based on this framework. And the framework is what's containing the discovery.
We'll get to your question. I want to make sure we do as we promised.
I'm taking it out and I'll ask it if there's time. Go ahead.
So I'm looking at the chat, lots of amazing questions. I'm going to try and distill what Paul and Suzanne going to have the same type of question, which is, I'm going to take Paul's because Suzanne says it was asked better. And we should promote them into this channel. It's like, as companies move towards one-person product teams, can AI really replicate the accurate, nuanced perspectives that diverse teams and customer personas bring? You've answered that to an extent, but it's probably worth promoting them up here to see if there's an angle. Paul and Suzanne. Hey, go ahead.
So I think that the intent of the question is, how do you still get that diversity in the discussion when you're actually representing your perspective and the other perspective is what AI comes back with? Am I translating the question a little bit? Or are you getting enough diversity in the conversation when those are the 2 participants?
Yeah, I think, again, Paul described it a little more clearly. But yes, like there's this pressure to consolidate our teams and to have like less people. And so like when you first brought up this concept, it's like, well, or could you use like different LLMs and kind of train them as like a persona to represent those viewpoints and perspectives? Like, I mean, this is an extreme case, but could you create an environment where your Gemini LLM, over here is trained as like the perspective of the lawyer, and over here like the designer and blah, blah, blah. Again, a little bit extreme, but yeah, there's like a little bit of a pressure for that. And like, yeah, just go ahead.
Paul.
Yeah,
Paul, did she capture? Is that it?
That's
Perfect.
the essence of it. Yes.
Perfect. Okay.
I love what you're saying, Suzanne. I think you can do personas in a couple ways. You can create a project persona. You can create 10 personas, drop them in a project, right? You can say these represent what we think to be our top target customer types. Or you could do it for personas of employees, right? These are my ops person, my customer service person, my finance person, and this is generally their risk profile, the things that they tend to object to, right? Like you can create those, whether they're customers or colleagues, okay, in the mix. I think there's still going to be a limitation that they're going to have through those personas enough detail to really understand cultural or social context. A great example of this is you're in a company and you go to a meeting and a stakeholder is just a contrarian because it's not their idea. But, okay, AI is good for that, but is it really giving you helpful feedback, right? Like that, that's not the kind of the feedback you're talking about. In a brainstorming session, what you typically have set people up for is the idea that there's psychological safety and no idea is a bad idea. And so you kind of have to also accept that with AI as well, right? And start out your prompts with suggesting all ideas should come to the table, and you should assume you're representing all customer types, and then I'll hone them down to the 4 or 5 I care about the most, or that seem the most divergent from my own perspective. And so I find we're so trained to go to productivity and efficiency and to go to that narrow space quickly. I think it takes some courage to live in that broader thing before you pull it down. Give me all the contrarian perspectives around this idea, or bring to me other people's experience that you would see if they were this personality or this persona or had this role. But at the same time, even doing that, you're kind of constraining AI to show up in a way. So for me, I try to use words that are more generic, more like a hypernym, something that describes something more broadly than specifically. And then that scenario, I then add the specificity once I see. So it becomes a layered approach to getting to what matters and what you focus on, but you're at least giving yourself a few minutes to lay the buffet and say, I'm going to stay over here on the dessert side because this is really what I'm excited about. But it's good to know this other stuff, and I can come back to this other stuff and probe and explore if there's something there. But I think it's that moment where we feel we have to have every perspective represented. We just want to make sure AI doesn't lean too quickly into a perspective. And so I think that's the antidote, right? Is to encourage it to stay away from specific perspectives as long as you can, to get something that then you can mold right into divergent perspectives.
I want to add something here, lived experience.
Oh, I was gonna do that, but yeah.
So the thing about AI, and I'm living this right now as with all my clients, is that even in these personas, they are still caricatures of what you think this thing is, right? If this is a contrarian person, or this is an African American person, or this is a woman who's a mother of 3, they are still caricatures, right? And there are these nuances, and I still believe you should do that. Get as many diverse, but remember, they're not real, they're synthetic, and they're often papered over. And that lived experience that's nuanced is often really hard for AI to find in the mix and the mean that it's creating with all the data points that it tries to do. So again, we say this in our Substack when we write, etc. The idea of judgment, taste, discernment will still be prized because AI will get you to the 85, 89%. But that little thing that is distinctive is going to be very human. It exists in AI. Don't get me wrong. There's probably a persona in there that has that nuanced experience, but because AI has to create a mean of sorts, it papers over that because of the 27 profiles it used to create this persona. There was only one who had that particular thing, right? And in the end, it doesn't make it through to ask that question that could make your brand stand out, make your product stand out. So it's just something to be mindful of. And even when you get it to the 80% or 90% of readiness, that 10%, putting it in front of other humans to get feedback is really prized and valued. Is that where you were going to go?
Yes. So, but I'll try to sharpen a piece of that. And I like this AMAs because I think of them as slightly slower spaces than, say, Substack or Twitter or whatever. AI is an averaging tool. Like, the best AI will hit maybe like 80, maybe 90 percentile of the best in the world because it's trained on the stuff we all make, dumb and smart. But obviously, like, the internet values smarter stuff. So the mean of what it creates will be 80, 90 percentile, which leaves a 10 percentile of alpha, right, to be made if you get the very best person on it that AI cannot touch, at least with the models that exist. And so I think replacing people with AI is tricky. If you just need average lawyering, well, try AI. If you need top-notch lawyering, you can't, is what it is. And so, you can apply that principle to anything. If you need exceptional creativity, then you're not going to be able to replace Einstein. But if you just need assistant professor, physicist type intelligence, then you can probably try, if that makes sense. So maybe it's a contextual thing. How much do you need that input? And how critical is it to the output that you need, as a way to think about whether you can just apply a team of agents to it to get a resource or not. And I'm saying this because I feel like it's a principal statement in how we as product people evolve what inputs we need to create the outputs we need, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. And one further point about sort of the shrinking of teams and the absence of diverse thinking as a result. You can actually, instead of just doing what we typically used to do, which is a one-page persona, you can actually give AI a video of someone giving a speech. You can get, there's so much more color and commentary that can come with a persona if you want to demonstrate more of that emotional context, right? Because we typically don't show that emotion even in a one-page persona description that we might give. And so it's an opportunity for us to recognize that multiple media types may actually tell our story even better, right? This is a person who was interviewed after some tragedy, and I have an innovative solution for it. Let's keep in mind, this is a real person who experienced the tragedy. Will you look at this video and then consider that, right? Not just what we described that person went through, right? So that
And that's
person's
the beautiful
talking in their own
thing, which
words.
is, don't just make a skill and expect the skill to be perfect. If you really want to have AI personalize or embody something, some expertise, maybe you should consider just continuous training of that or continuous skilling of that versus thinking about it as, okay, here's one skill for the lawyer. But it's like, okay, here's my particular kind of lawyer, and I'm going to feed you information that makes it more and more and more like that. If that makes any sense. I really love that. I think it's a great thing to take away.
Thank you so much, Suzanne and Paul. Really appreciate it. I'm going to scrub for more questions. Aji, why don't you ask your other question in the meantime?
Okay. I feel like I'm asking an apocalyptic question.
Lord, help us.
It feels to me like I've tried to play it forward, and it feels like inevitable that human-centered design will be much worse off in the AI world. Like, we've already started talking about remediation, like how to prevent this and how to prompt it and give it more video. Like, it's all like as if we are coming from a place of, oh my God, it's going to be bad, but here's how you can prevent it from being less bad. So I guess my question is, do you agree or are you optimistic? And if you agree with me, how bad will it get? And are there plausible counterweights, basically?
So I don't think I actually don't think it's worse than it would have been with people who didn't do human-centered design and launched a lot of products that didn't work. I think that we did that a lot more than we wanted to have done it before. Even when we did human-centered design at T-Mobile with Cameo, it was a great product that failed miserably. Again, I think the failure of human-centered design existed before AI, and those failures will probably get amplified by AI. Okay. So there's no reason to suggest that I have to be more pessimistic. I just have to be more alert, maybe, that there is a push, right, towards those gaps that we experienced when we did do design thinking, right? So there is still a push for that. Having said that, one of the other techniques that I really think helps us get over, like you say, the counterweight of this problem is in the book is the last chapter is story thinking. And excuse me. And pardon me, I interviewed Scott Belsky, who I think is an amazing storyteller, for that chapter, because I think we think of story thinking as pitch making, as understanding the narrative that our marketing team is going to put around our product. But what story thinking really is so connected to human-centered design in a couple of ways. One is it really projects forward the consequences of the world you're creating, which we tend not to do in design thinking. We think we've solved the problem and the box is checked. But what you have to see is, did I create new problems? Does this solution create other needs that I didn't think about? Is it a different context now if this solution exists for my customers? And so story thinking takes the idea before you even build it and forces you to look at what happens if you're actually successful and the consequences of that success. And a really great thing you hear all the time in Shark Tank stories is that people were so successful, they sold out of inventory and they haven't been able to get new inventory. And so now the consequences is their business has gone down. And now they have to start over again virtually because they have no momentum, right? And so the consequences of success can be devastating sometimes, right? They could create new tax situations. They could create different regulatory triggers that you didn't imagine. And so story thinking is really helpful in putting that out there as the emotional ramifications as well as the actual business ramifications of what happens if this comes true and we launch it. So that's one great thing about story thinking. The other great thing about story thinking I have this worksheet too. I haven't built the skill for it, but I'll send you the worksheet so you can share that as well. But the other great thing about story thinking is it forces you to look at the key moments that you're trying to address. And those moments are where the meaning is. And how you connect those moments is what defines the product. And if you use this framework with AI, it stays on the course of connecting the dots between as is and to be, and what will happen consequentially if I'm right. But it also allows me to see how a customer will navigate the moments, not just in a jobs to be done way, but sort of in those story beat ways, right? Like, what is their perspective of that key moment at that time? And so when you think about story thinking in the case of a product manager, particularly, you think, I see it going from A to B, B to C, and maybe we skip D sometimes and we go to E in an express way. But maybe if you skip D, the customer loses trust before you hit E, right? And if D is representing a key story moment for someone, right, that express may actually be the wrong thing to do. And so when we think about story thinking as a way to offset that sort of lack of customer experience, and you give AI this sort of worksheet framework to go navigate the future and the way the story comes to life for the customer, you get that lived experience context sort of brought back to you. Well, what happens if I went from A to B and skipped C and went to D? Okay, this is what it'll do. It'll speed it up over here. It'll make it more efficient, but I'll lose trust because that step was critical to building trust. It didn't do anything else but build trust. And so story thinking to me is the antidote to what you're describing, that offset where we've lost the human contact. But now when you go back and tell it as a narrative in that format, you really start to see the pillars that you have to touch to move forward with the product in a way that actually helps the customer.
You're blowing my mind. Listen, Leslie, we got to keep working together because we got to... No, you're talking about rare skills, and I recognize this. And I want to see this come to light because we've all been talking about code skills. Like if you go to GitHub, we talk about design skills and coding skills and superpowers and this and that and that. We've been obsessed at ProductMind about product layer skills and actually sometimes business layer skills, not the coding skills. Because it's really 3 layers, right? It's code, it's product, and it's business, which sort of wraps it all together. And we, in the product community, we have to stop trading with these. Sure, Cloud Code is the belle of the ball right now, but that's not enough to make differentiated value-creating companies. And so we are obsessed. We started to create skills at this layer, not this layer. And the stuff you talked about are perfect candidates. So let's figure out how we can talk about it. Maybe even make you rich. Who knows? Like, we got to figure out how to.
She's already rich, guys. Come on.
Okay,
Forget about
richer,
it.
richer,
I'm rich with
richer.
what makes me so happy is that this resonates. That's the
Yes,
richness
it
for me.
does.
I mean, the fact that
Yeah.
the book goes out there and people go, aha, right? That's what
No,
that's
if it doesn't resonate, it's because they can't receive it. This is not a critique on you; it's a critique on them. Okay.
No. Okay, hold on. Okay, I noticed that I'm not getting a lot of
Sorry.
questions, so I want to make sure I leave this group with something really tangible. I'm going to put you a bit on the spot, Leslie. Okay, I want to make it real because I think I only have this question and maybe a wrap up question, unless somebody raises their hands.
We want you to spotlight
Uh,
you, and we want to put you out
uh,
there.
I'm going to give you a problem, Leslie, and I want you to run through one of your frameworks live, the way you would probably do with a Maven cohort. I actually sent a couple friends over to you for your Maven course, and they loved it. They raved about it. So thank you for having them. Really appreciate it. So I'm going to ask you to probably, maybe you may draw from generic parts technique or your contradictory thinking or even your what if method, for example. I'm going to try and figure out if I can come up with a good question that you can do. Okay, our internal search is broken, right? And users say they can't find anything, right? But when we dig into the data, the content is there. Now, leadership is asking us to add AI search. Where do we start? Just walk me through what you would do in a course. I just want to make sure people understand how to use it.
Totally. So I always want to start with the generic parts technique because I think it is such a great platform for recognizing the frame you're working within. And I think as product leaders, particularly, we find ourselves fixated on how things work and which things we think work well, we're less willing to touch. And so we maybe exclude them from the description of the problem, or we build them into the solution that we're seeking so that we don't get the best view of the problem space. So the generic parts technique would actually take that entire system of search and break it down as to what's actually happening. Because if the data is there and the customer is putting in something, what's broken in how it works is what you're trying to figure out. So you solve the problem in the right place. And you also solve a problem in a way that actually is systemic as opposed to feature or pain point focus, right? Because before you get to the feature, the pain point, you need to understand how the system operates and which part of the systems are failing or breaking down when the customer is trying to take the action. And so I would look at running a generic parts technique exercise with AI around that experience. I would describe the experience of a customer creating an internal search query. If there's details about whether or not those queries are limited to certain topics or certain data, right? I'd certainly include that, but I would also describe what the process is as designed. And by doing that, I would take it out of the pieces. There's an interface. I would take it out of that into what they're functionally providing, and then look at this as a sequence of functional capabilities that deliver an outcome. Once I have that, then I can look at where the constraints and the friction points are in that system. And what you often find when you run this exercise as a product person, and this happens pretty much every time I do it, is that you're staying narrowly focused into what's creating the problem because you're so aware of where the friction point is. And what this does is it forces you to zoom out first to look at where you could actually create a solution that would maybe upstream or downstream remove the problem. But because you've looked at it as a user problem or a user input problem, you're more focused on maybe I should look at predefining some inputs, or I should give them directions so they get to the data quick. But maybe there's something else in that system that's failing. And so if you can break it down to its functional steps, I think what ends up happening is people start to realize there are other systems at play that could contribute this. I run this exercise on things that are as complex as logging into streaming services at your Airbnb. If anybody like me has done it, every time I walk into an Airbnb, I just want to have a teeth scraping because it's so painful to get Netflix and Hulu and everything all lined up. And then I have to remember to undo them when I leave. Right? But if I frame that as a login problem, I might only solve it with the equipment I have. right? I might only
Yeah.
solve it with the
Yes.
television and the remote control, when it could be a
Yeah.
back-end system that when I rent that property, Airbnb just provides a temporary token to all my accounts. And nowhere does the hardware ever change, right? In your
Mm.
scenario, it may be, right, that the interface is the problem, but it may actually also be what is happening behind the scenes in how that information is being parsed and delivered to the user. So unless you separate out sort of the action and the pain from the functional things that are providing it, you'll probably focus on
Mm-hmm.
a short-term fix as opposed to a
Mm.
systemic fix. Is that helpful in
That's
the
really good.
getting there?
It is. It is. I mean, having read your book, I just want to make sure there are a couple of tools from the generic parts, which really breaks search into its core functions first and then makes you step back. Then there's
Yep.
also like contradictory thinking, which would ask the question, is it really is the problem search really? And then there is the what
Exactly.
if method that would actually go, were they searching? Were they browsing? Like, how do we know the difference between it? But it allows, if you ask these questions, you can then begin to have a richer conversation with your team versus going to go build that AI search function. So that's what I love about the book and the tools you've provided that really allow me to coach teams through some of these hard questions.
I think
Okay.
you hit on a really good one too. I just want to underscore. We go into this with assumptions that we think we hold true, but we also don't challenge those assumptions along the way to see where they
Mhm.
might break down. And the assumption
Okay.
is there's one answer on search that's a good answer. Well, maybe you
Mhm.
misunderstood the query, right? Like all those things we assume may actually be undermining our ability to deliver the right solution.
Okay. I saw, Michael, you had your hand raised. This is a quick one.
I don't think so. So I have to jump on another call. I just wanted to thank everybody
Okay.
because it would probably
No.
spark everybody to talk even more. So we'll
Go.
talk again. I appreciate everybody so much. And Leslie, I'm going to buy
Yeah.
your book. It sounds amazing. Appreciate you.
If you want to hit
It
me up with a
is.
question on LinkedIn, please feel free.
And then
Thank you.
drop it also into the community Slack. We'll get the answer for you as well and make sure other people get to learn. Okay.
And all three of you.
With that, I have one more question. What's the one question you wish most interviewers asked about your book?
You know,
And you have the answer.
yeah. So I think people wonder why I wrote this book. Like what prompted me to
Mm.
write this book. And I think the story is pretty important. And so because I think it's relevant to other people, I'm not special. And I'm not a specially endowed creative person, but I've been really lucky in my career in almost a Forrest Gumpian way. Like I interviewed with Steve Jobs. Why did that happen? I worked with James Cameron on The Abyss. Why did that happen? Like I'm not special in that way, but I had to understand a little bit about how I was able to survive and build a career, actually two careers, because I was in the film industry for 13 years and in the Directors Guild of America while I was in the film industry. And I knew nobody in the film industry when I moved there. So part of what I realized was I actually was doing this myself. And then realizing I needed to coach people over the course of my career to think this way, right? To be
Mm.
capable of thinking in a way that's divergent, that's not common, that's
Mm-hmm.
not necessarily predictable. It's not always been
Mm.
great for me. I'll admit that. I know that there are certain organizations, especially large organizations, that struggle with divergent thinking and people who aren't consensus driven. I'm not a consensus driven product leader, so that's not always a great place for me to show up. But at the same time, I realized when people truly want disruption and innovation, they don't always know how to activate it. And a part of the reason
Mm.
they don't know how to activate it is because they don't see themselves as creative people. And that was me. In my childhood, I wanted so desperately to be creative. I wanted to be skilled at some art form, and I sucked at them all. I was terrible at everything: piano, sculpting, theater, name it. I sucked. And I was so demoralized thinking I would have to be a math brain, right? That I'd have to be a logical person. And then I realized over time through my career in the film industry, I wasn't a cinematographer, I wasn't a stylist, I wasn't a screenwriter, I wasn't a set designer, but I was the person everybody came to solve any problem they hadn't seen before. Because that was my job. That's what
Mm.
people paid me to do. You need to get an aircraft carrier for a Kleenex commercial? Okay, I don't know how they're going to do it, but I'll go figure it out. You want to get a picture of a nuclear sub in the Hood Canal for Crimson Tide? I don't know, but I'll figure it out. And that skill, right, that belief in myself that I could figure it out really carried me. And I saw so many people who didn't have that secure belief that they could figure stuff out. And it was mostly because they didn't know how to tap it, not because they weren't capable. And so it really became sort of my mission with the book to get people to see themselves in that vein, to see themselves as having that capability, as something they could grow and some muscle they could build. And in that, I think everyone has the capacity to be disruptive and innovative and inventive and imaginative, but they have to see themselves that way first. And so I think that's the most important thing. For why I'm the right person to write this book is because I had a career that showed it was my scaffolding. It helped me move through it. It helped me get that next opportunity. And when Steve Jobs asked me what was it like to be the product manager of crappy products because he hated real networks, I had to think about how I would answer that question with equanimity, not defensiveness, right? All the things that were in the book, I had to be able to bring to bear. And so knowing I had those resources, I wanted to share them because I think so many people felt like I did. They don't have the skills or the capability.
Yeah. Leslie, I've known you for a while and I'm so appreciative of who you are and how much support you've had through my career. You are an amazing person. If you guys haven't bought her book, please go buy it and follow her, listen to her. I had the benefit of working for her and then working with her through the years, and I learned so much. And trust me, it wasn't easy being the divergent thinker in the executive suite. Trust me, I saw the things that happened, but she was bold. And I always talk about courage. And Leslie was freaking courageous. I work with Jeff and Leslie. We've tried to hire people, but the person who says the thing nobody is saying was Leslie. And she got us to take big bets that nobody thought we could. So I'm so glad that she's been able to take a lot of what she thinks and how she's worked and the principles and put it in a book. So please buy the book, read the book, follow her. There's a lot of learning to do. And you can see even Audrey spending time with her is like, crap, I got to work with you because in this AI world, we're working on the software, the code. But to even create something most compelling is really in this creative space. So thank you so much for your time, Leslie. It's been such a pleasure having you on board. Y'all take care. Thanks for joining us. And then see you next time.
It was my pleasure as well. Thank you so much.
Yes. Hi, everyone. Why don't you go off mute? Sure.
Bye, everyone. It's such a
Bye, everyone.
pleasure.
On
Yeah.
LinkedIn, I'll be happy to answer questions as well.
Please
Yeah.
follow her on LinkedIn. Hit her up on LinkedIn. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.